All right, here we go. It's my pleasure to welcome Sam to the channel. Welcome. So I'll just start off with a bit of a ramble to kind of talk about how we started communicating, and we'll lead into actually you formally introducing yourself. So Sam has been a viewer for the ch of my channel for a couple of years, and he reached out to do an interview, a couple interviews, the links to which I'll include in the description. But something I found very intriguing about Sam is the quality of questions that he asks. It's the kind of the quality of questions I noticed yeah, at first glance they seem kind of straightforward, but I noticed that the more I think about the questions that he asks, the more I realize just the sheer amount of thought that's been put into them. And I just found that remarkable because it took me until my early 30s to really start questioning the world in the way I feel like Sam has figured out how to question for a long time. So part of this is to get to understand Sam better, his thought process, his background. And I've also noticed an increase in creatives in my channel. And I just want to give people, outside of academia, some more perspectives, something that hopefully helps them. So again, thank you, Sam, for joining me. Very nice to have you. And yeah, we'll just get to, yeah, so please go ahead and introduce yourself. Anything you'd like to share.
First of all, thank you, Youngmin, for the opportunity to talk with you. It's a pleasure, and thank you for the kind words about the questions that I asked. I like to think of myself as a decent critical thinker, and yeah, someone that only asks questions that I'm really interested in, and so I do put thought into them. So yeah, I'm glad that you recognize that. In terms of myself, I live in the UK. I used to live in San Francisco for a long time, so I'm a dual citizen. Um, I've primarily worked in audio production since I graduated. I did a degree in sound arts and design here in London and then moved to the States. But while kind of working in audio production, I was also doing unrelated jobs as well to really kind of make money and support myself because I found it difficult throughout my kind of adult working life to maintain and obtain and maintain kind of stable, gratifying work in kind of spheres that I was interested in. And so yeah, part of that is what helped me or led me to create my YouTube channel, which you featured on Working to Work, which explores the intersection of neurodivergence and employment and kind of looking at why autistic people and other neurodivergent people have a significantly lower rate of employment than the wider population and also than any other disability group. And yeah, to explore, so basically to explore my own challenges in employment, but also give a platform to others to talk about both their challenges, but also strengths and successes in terms of obtaining and realizing a career path that works for them, which in part is what interested me about talking to you, that you've found your way into something that is gratifying, does align with your strengths, but you also speak in your channel about the challenges in getting to where you are now, both kind of mentally and professionally. So I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, and I'm of course very happy that I can provide something useful to people. And regarding your channel, yeah, I'll include a link to your channel in the description. We're kind of like I guess like trading interviews, but also I mean you also do music, so I'll include a link to your website with which has examples of your music too. Um, but right, so let's see. And as far as diagnoses go, maybe we just briefly mention that. What are your diagnoses? When were you diagnosed?
So it's not a kind of simple kind of linear journey in terms of diagnosis. Maybe a bit over 10 for a long period in my kind of mid 20s to now, I guess I had challenges, I think, with aspects of mental health and depression. And I think to contemporary me thinks very much that those were symptoms of kind of underlying differences related to neurodivergence that weren't identified. I think you hear a lot of people, neurodivergent people, especially that are diagnosed later in life, speak to that, and that very much resonates with me. Um, 10 years ago, I was being treated for ADHD but I didn't know anything really about ADHD. I just knew that I was struggling to focus and complete work that I could do, but just wasn't doing it. And I was hearing from some radio producers that I worked with that really appreciated what I could do, but were confused about why I was making such slow progress. And it wasn't I couldn't do it, that it was kind of, it was just I wasn't doing it. And I was kind of, and I didn't want to disappoint them, but I also wasn't sure what was going on there in terms of why I wasn't doing the work. And I spoke to a friend in San Francisco, when I was living in San Francisco, a friend there just explaining that situation to them. And I guess they had an ADHD diagnosis or access to stimulant medication. I took Adderall for the first time then. Maybe this was, yeah, 10, 11 years ago. And it was that kind of experience of, wow, finally I can focus. That first time you take it and it just feels just incredible. Like it was amazing. But I kind of just went to the doctor then and said, I was having this struggle. I took this and it worked. And for whatever reason, I was prescribed Adderall at that time, but not kind of informed, or I don't recall about ADHD that much. So I was kind of taking the medication for a year. And then I think at some point they said, okay, if you're going to continue taking it, you need to have this consultation, which now, when I reflect back, was kind of an ADHD assessment. But again, I was kind of not in the best mental state. So maybe I knew this, but anyway, to cut a long story short, I think in that period I was still in a kind of defensive mode where I wasn't as able to kind of reflect back at my past. So they talked a lot about childhood experiences and in school where I did have lots of challenges with focus and um, other kind of attributes related to ADHD, but I didn't really speak about my childhood, I think, accurately. So I didn't get the diagnosis then, and effectively stopped the medication. So at that point, I kind of forgot about ADHD and stopped thinking about that medication and just continued with depression and anxiety and kind of having that treated. Then in 2020, I finally got a dyslexia diagnosis. I have challenges related to dyslexia, and I thought in school when I was really young that I should get that, and but I didn't. But I finally got that, and that was helpful to an extent. And yeah, then finally, like this is such a long-winded story. So,
No
yeah,
problem.
I
Yeah, yeah,
this is
please.
the bit that was always going to trip me up because it's just not so clear, and I still feel that I should be as accurate as possible. Anyway, cut to maybe like 2022. I was really struggling in a job, not in terms of the work itself, but in terms of the social aspects of it. And a year prior, I'd talking to my friend about my mental health, and he had mentioned neurodiversity, and I hadn't. It might be one of those things where you recognize something only kind of when someone's mentioned it to you. Like if someone tells you about Hoka shoes and you never heard of it, but then you start seeing it all around because you have it in your mind. So then, yeah, I started looking into neurodiversity and found podcasts that kind of really spoke to my experience of the world. And I'd had colleagues mention autism in terms of the way that in meetings I would really kind of need to try to understand why we were doing something and the context to be able to, I feel, deliver my best work. So I think I got to a point after leaving a job in a bit of kind of um, a not a breakdown, but a difficult mental state where I was talking to the GP. I don't want to take any more antidepressants. I've been speaking to you about referring to me for ADHD for a long time. Can you do this? And by that point, I joined a coaching group for neurodivergent creatives, and that primarily the people there were diagnosed or identified as autistic, and through that experience, I recognized um, uh, that I was autistic, given the kind of characteristics that are applied to autism. So yeah, in that year, I got those two diagnoses. So I guess autism, ADHD, and dyslexia are the neurodivergent diagnoses I have.
Okay. Yeah. And please, yeah, please feel free to expand on anything as much as you like. I think more context always helps. You know, my audience is I feel, wonderfully and maybe even unusually thoughtful. Um, and it's almost like people for one reason or another, we often don't talk about these things in too much detail. So this is fantastic. And to give a little bit more context for your like as far as professional work goes, what would you call yourself professionally? What's your calling slash profession?
But it's kind of in flux at the moment because I've been working primarily, as I mentioned, as an audio producer. So producing podcasts or producing radio. I produced work for NPR when I was living in the States via these producers that I mentioned, where I was struggling to kind of just get the work done. And then when I came back to the UK, I was producing freelancing for projects for organizations like Tate, which is a big gallery here, or taking on different various projects. So I've worked in a lot of different organizations from small charities, nonprofits, to larger organizations. To I worked at a company called Blinkist, which is an app that kind of summarizes books, and they wanted to do something similar with audio. So I had kind of more experience there in the tech business world. So my experience is kind of varied in terms of audio production. Fundamentally, I think of myself as a creative person in general. Like I used to draw a lot when I was a child, and then I think at some point around 10, I found music and started writing songs. But I also create videos for the songs I write. So I generally just genuinely really enjoy creating and making things. And if my dream job would be, or used to think, just someone to pay me to be able to make things, um, and I kind of fell into audio as it being something that was possible for me to do, that there was work in the early 2000s that aligned with what the skills that I had. I felt like I graduated with a first, which is the kind of top grade that you can get in UK universities in my field. So I did really well after doing really poorly in high school, because I felt I was doing something that I was passionate about. I was directing the projects, but I still kind of lacked the confidence and belief, I think, at the time, that I could then become a sound artist or become a musician, which I've been working on music for the majority of my life. So as I say, I kind of fell into where work was rather than kind of identifying what it was fundamentally I wanted to do, and went in that direction. Now I'm trying to change course a little bit and trying to believe a bit more in my own creative projects and help realize them. But also, I've found a lot of gratification over the years, even in work that I've done that doesn't necessarily align with what my deeper interests are, but has paid money, in supporting other people, maybe more junior producers, or just in collaboration. So, as well as pursuing my own projects now, creative projects, I'm really invested in um, supporting others to realize their own projects, and in particular, neurodivergent people and those with experience of mental ill health, because I think to a certain extent, I can relate very much to the challenges there and the unique, maybe adaptable needs that those people have to be able to realize not just the kind of ideas that they want to create, but kind of to a certain extent the life that will be fulfilling for them. Because I think we've maybe talked about in our previous conversation that employment is such a big part of one's life, and um, yeah, so that's kind of what I would really like to do. And I've kind of trying to develop an initiative called Creative Harbor, that will be a vessel for me to be able to do that work in collaboration with other people with different skills. Um, I don't know how much you want me to expand on this, but this is something I'm really passionate about. What I think worked for me at university was the idea of a faculty, that I had an idea, or multiple ideas, that were primarily sound-based, but they also required some coding experience, and I had limited coding experience. So what I loved about university was my idea wasn't limited by the expertise of the primary project supervisor that I had. I could go to someone else that could help with an element of my project that that person that I was supervising my project couldn't because they didn't have those skills. And that enabled me to realize a more novel, innovative idea. And I think from my experience, a lot of neurodivergent people have novel ideas, think about things in different ways where they can create something that isn't already existing but can think outside of that. So beyond just supporting people to realize ideas, I want to create an initiative that allows for the development of fully realized ideas that are not limited. So I've got an idea of how that would work, and it would kind of be modeled, I guess, on faculty in a university.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a lot there. Yeah, so I want to I just yeah, let's so the which is great again. So the one thing is I agree that yeah, careers if we're going to spend our lives doing something that's purely not just recreational, then I feel like yeah, there needs to be some um meaning behind it, which I feel that yeah, some of us are very lucky to have. But I think when I was in, especially in high school for me, before college, just like you, who it was kind of hard to imagine a fulfilling life after just seeing people work and just be unhappy. So this initiative you have, yeah, what is like, could you explain it a little bit more?
So yeah, I'm tentatively calling it Creative Harbor, and the idea would be that there are um, a group of facilitators or a kind of collective of facilitators, each with their own unique skill set. So, for example, my skill set would be potentially like audio production or music production or development, and yours would be, I guess, you're a mathematician. There would be a biology would be a part that you could be particularly helpful in. You can, I know you can draw and have many other strings to your bow as we do, but if we say that was your core focus, say there was a participant that was coming into the organization that fundamentally they had an idea that was an audio idea, but there was some aspect of, I know that coding isn't kind of your key skill, but for just for the purpose of this, maybe there was an aspect where they needed to do some development of an app that could be done in Python. What I think doesn't work for some people is to just tell that participant, okay, why don't you write to Young Min and maybe they'll be able to help you. I think sometimes what you find there is that person just doesn't do that or don't have the confidence to do that, or there's that could be to somewhere where it kind of falls down a little bit. I like the idea of, okay, Youngmin's in this network in Creative Harbor. Let's arrange a chat with him to see what advice potentially he could offer in terms of developing this idea. And it's not necessarily that you're going to do it for them. They would have some base skills in Python, but you would be able to advise them in a way that I couldn't because I don't have those skills. So for example, going back to university, I had Max MSP was the software I was using to develop a kind of interface for an audio project. I had some of those skills, but I didn't have the technical ability at that time to be able to fully realize it, or the time to be able to do all aspects and upskill to the extent that I needed to. So you're kind of just gaining a bit more skill from that person. But similarly, if you were in the initiative, you would primarily be working, let's just say, for example, Python is the main thing that, because I just can't think of a good example of math at the moment. That was your key skill. So you would primarily be working with someone that's looking to develop a creative app or project, but there might be a sonic element to it. And you might, with your participant, come to me and have an hour's time or a few meetings to talk about how best to develop that sonic element. And similarly, there could be another aspect where there's dance in it, and there's someone that works in theatre that you go to with the person that you're primarily working with. So I see it as kind of like a network that doesn't limit the potential of ideas or the scope of the ideas being realized, but also with a like-minded faculty, so to speak, that all have an understanding and a willingness to share and understand the sensibilities and believe in kind of a similarly a mission, a kind of clear mission of the organization. It's not completely fleshed out, and at this point, I'm like trying to do that work and seeking grant funding to allow me to have that time to develop the idea. Um, and I'm really grateful that there are organizations out there that offer that funding to develop the idea. And not necessarily that I would get it, but I like that it exists.
Yeah,
I
that's
hope
really
that makes
cool.
sense.
Yeah, please.
Please do
Yeah.
ask as well if there's anything in that structure that doesn't make sense, because it's useful for me to actually have to explain it or see where I'm not explaining it as well, or the value of it as well as possible.
It's tricky because to me, everything you said makes perfect sense. But
Oh, good.
unfortunately, you have to, especially with grant funding, the way I understand it is that you're really trying to use the language of the solicitation, and you're speaking to a particular audience that might be relatively hostile, not necessarily hostile, but relatively less receptive to your ideas. So in that sense, it's hard for me to like I don't really have any questions right off the bat because I'm just like, yeah, like that makes perfect sense. Everything you said is just that would be great to have as as something for. I mean, I don't know. I like I just don't have any notes off the
I'd
top of my
love there
head.
to be, just to offer as well, I'd love there to be someone in the organization or the initiative or collective or however we term it that, for example, is an expert in grant writing. So perhaps they could, primarily there could be someone that comes in with a writing project that they are fundamentally working with, but they also could have a secondary role where they're applying for funding for the initiative, but also supporting um, participants in gaining funding for their project, whether within Creative Harbor or going forward, because I like the idea that unlike some initiatives and support that I see that where it's kind of, okay, you work within this organization for a period to develop something and then you're kind of on your own. I like the idea of there being support to kind of, okay, now what? How can we support you to market or promote or have your work in a gallery? I like the idea of there being some development support and kind of lasting, not care, but follow through.
Yeah, yeah.
Care too.
Um, yeah, I mean, please keep us updated on the progress for that. Um, yeah, that seems like a potentially very valuable. I mean, yeah, not even potentially. It seems like a very valuable thing that's sorely needed.
And I think of working to work as kind of sort of foundational research into that, because I'm speaking to a lot of people that potentially, to an extent, would benefit from uh, this kind of project or this kind of initiative, but also people that I've worked with, um, the groups that I'm particularly looking to support as well. When I think of like kind of academics that I've spoken to, working not so much like you, but working with in the realm of autism and or government. Uh, so yeah,
Yeah, very cool. Um, let's see. So I've already forgotten a few of the other follow-up questions I wanted to ask. So maybe I'll just go through in sequence the questions that I wanted to start with, and then we can always branch off from there. So, um, well, yeah, let's start with where did you grow up and what was your childhood like? And in particular, ADHD, autism, dyslexia, these things, I imagine you always had them. You were just diagnosed later. So, um, and also depression. So I don't know. There's a lot to this first question, but I guess yeah. So
do you want me
what
to
did you
just
struggle
take?
with in and out of school? Yeah, school.
Okay. In terms of where I grew up in South London. So yeah, my mum was from the States and my dad is from London, but was born and grew up here. So I went to school in South London, which is a diverse area in socioeconomic sense and racial, ethnic sense, and quite an intense environment as well. Like not ideally suited to my sensibilities, where I kind of prefer quiet and a bit more calm and a bit more orderly. San Francisco very much aligned with my kind of inner sensibilities and the beauty of the place. From I'm not massive into cities, but it is, but one adapts. So childhood in that sense, I think there was good aspects to childhood. I think I was a relatively happy child in points, but I was extremely anxious. I was very nervous at times, and I had a lot of fear. I think a lot of other kids scared me, and that was difficult. And um, I'm I'm sympathetic to my parents. I think to a certain extent, uh, one can feel potentially that your needs weren't met, that you weren't heard properly in terms of when one voiced those concerns and challenges, that it wasn't kind of responded to in a way that in hindsight would have been more useful. But I tried to get to a point where you recognize they're also just people that are doing their best, and um, I do think they were doing their best. But I remember they took me when I was maybe 10 to see some type of medical or professional of some sort about kind of the just fear and anxiety. And I would have fear a lot of what might happen. I have a very vivid imagination, and I can project potential scenarios uh, that I was fearful about that haven't actually happened as well, probably based on things that actually were happening and just how they might kind of escalate. And that was challenging because you're kind of alone. But I didn't have very I can't think of the word that's it means that where something is um, deemed as a kind of medical problem, uh, uh,
I don't
pathologizing.
know what.
I didn't have very
Okay.
pathologizing parents, so it wasn't there wasn't this sense of what's wrong. Maybe it's autism, maybe it's ADHD, and we've got to remember as well. I just turned 40, so we're talking about a time in the late 90s when the idea of I think the idea of neurodiversity was just being developed in like 98 or something. So this kind of paradigm wasn't really around when I went to school. Like the only test that you had was for dyslexia, and again I regret not doing that. But yeah, I think I was a fearful child, but I was felt relatively bright at that time. I think when I got into secondary school, high school, or middle school, I guess you'd call it, I struggled a bit more. I think my processing was potentially a bit slower, and my focus was I, progressively. I found it more difficult. I think to focus. I would be distracted a lot and probably also distract people. So yeah, sometimes it gets sent out. And I think this kind of got worse and worse as I felt that I was be struggling in school more. Maybe it's the same in the States, but you're grouped based on inverted commas ability. And as you drop down these groups, you're in classes with people that are potentially more disruptive. Um, and
It's
it becomes even, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's a bit different. But uh, before I'm very curious about something. So when it came to fear, you mentioned being fearful and being scared of other children, or kind of you have a vivid imagination. Could you speak more on that? I mean, what were you afraid of, and what did you imagine?
I mean, there were situations where people, even in kind of elementary school, where people would say, "Oh, I'm going to get you after school," and like then I wouldn't be able to stop thinking about something, thinking about like so it would basically ruin the whole day. I mean, I find that even now, not fear, but for example, this interview, I can't not. It kind of kills the morning in a sense because I can't not be thinking to a certain extent that this is something I've got to do. Um, and but this is not a negative situation where if it's something where I'm actually really fearful about it and it's scary, like I can't put that to one side, so that a lot of fear builds up. And sometimes I was chased or have been attacked numerous times growing up particularly as a teenager. And even a few years ago was attacked. It isn't. I imagine nowhere is, but there are genuine threats, and yeah. So the fear wasn't all isn't all kind of in my head, uh, but yeah, to give you a kind of more concrete example, I remember kind of being around, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, and I thinking about potentially being peer pressured into doing graffiti or taking drugs or something like that. And the reality is, when I got into my teens, I actually wanted to explore all those things independently. There was no peer pressure really to do that. Maybe potentially there's environmental influence, but there was never a situation where I felt like you got to do this, do that. These things just it didn't happen like that. Um, it's hard to pinpoint the fear. And again, I think if 10, 12 years ago when I was struggling with ADHD related focus and these type of things, it would have been great to recall to the psychiatrist these kind of examples and probably would have got this diagnosis that would have helped me in the last decade or so. Um, but yeah, I think one potentially blocks out to a certain extent the memories that are more challenging, but it's useful, I think, for me to reflect on them to a certain extent, um, to kind of come to terms with
And
them.
when you say attacked, do you mind sharing what that looked like, what that was like?
As a teenager, I remember sometimes South London, maybe anywhere. I don't know. This is the place I know. It could be some where you can look at someone and they can be upset over how you looked at them. And I remember being cut with a knife on my lip. I've been chased for someone's trying to steal my phone. I remember they asked me for the time. This was actually when I was in my early 20s. They asked me for the time. Clearly, they wanted to steal a phone. I told them the time just looking at, a regular watch. This was before kind of fancy smartwatches. And he was like, no, the other time. And so basically, get out your phone. And then the train came, but I knew this person was going to try and still wanted to steal it, and I got off at my stop and I ran, and they chased me. But I'm a fast runner. I'm blessed, I think, with decent kind of physical athletic abilities. I was able to outrun them. But even a couple of years ago, I was walking back from the gym. It was dark. I was listening to music. I've got these same AirPods with the noise cancelling, so you can't hear anything really. Which maybe isn't great to do in a city where in San Francisco you could do it. Here, not so much, and you can't hear anything. And I was grabbed and punched in the face. And the strange thing about that situation is I'm not even, presumably they wanted to rob me, but I'm not even sure what they wanted because I still had Radiohead like blasting in my ears and I couldn't hear anything until they like punched me in the head and one of the AirPods flew out. And then, but in a way, I knew that was potentially a good thing because then he had such a tight grip on my arm that I knew once he punched me, then I could run. And I ran and tried to get into a house, like knocked on the door, please let me in, I'm being attacked. Understandably, to a certain extent, the person didn't let me in because that's quite scary as well. It was a young woman in her 20s, I think, and the people in the house called the police. Police never came. It was the people trying to attack me taunted me for like 20 minutes, and yeah, eventually they left and was able to get home. But yeah, I guess the point is, all the fear is not completely misplaced.
Yeah, that's wow. Well, I'm glad you're safe. And I hope you continue to stay safe. I mean, all things considered, uh, you came out of that okay. I mean, you got punched, but thank goodness that nothing worse happened. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, that does seem unusually more harsh, that compared to the States. It's kind of there's very, very specific parts of the States where that might happen, but yeah, not that's unusual to me.
yeah. I mean, when I lived there in San Francisco for 7, 8 years, and it was so good for my nervous system. I mean, had struggles there related to mental health and neurodivergent challenges, but just in terms of feeling safe, like it was a blessing. And it's just such a slower place, and cars are going to stop for you. They're not going to run through the light. You're not being shouted at all the time. It's just considerably more easy. Also just being surrounded by water on three sides, it's much more
And
relaxing.
And yeah, with regards, so I mean, since you're in an environment where you have to be, you might be constantly anxious or overly anxious, overtly anxious if you're not careful. How do you even manage that anxiety? And also, how did you manage it when you were growing up?
I don't think I did manage it particularly well when I was growing up. Yeah, sleep was impacted. Yeah, it was difficult. I tried to share with my dad that I felt really anxious. I remember as a teenager, I remember him saying, I've mentioned this to him, but like him saying, "Well, I don't feel anxious," and like I was like, "Well, that doesn't help me at all." And then I think from that, like when one gets that type of response, and if he's watching, I hope he knows that again, I understand we all could do better or could do things differently if we do it again. But that, from my perspective, means that you're not then going to go to that person because you didn't get a response that was helpful. And his perspective is on the past, well, you didn't talk to me about things. But my perspective is, well, when I tried to, I didn't get a response that was useful. So I kind of shut myself away. So I didn't really have a relationship, I feel, with my parents, more, maybe a bit more of my mum, because I think our minds were a bit more similar, where she could kind of understand my sensibilities more. Um, but you're kind of a bit alone at that time. And again, this is a completely different time to now where mental health and neurodivergence are spoken about much more. This just wasn't then. I think at that point, kind of maybe turn to things like weed and just other ways to not numb myself, but to a certain extent cocoon myself and um, other ways to manage. But those, from my perspective, don't really help you manage. They kind of make you more anxious. I have found that stimulant medication, at the right dose, can help me with anxiety. Also, have a beyond focus, have an added benefit in terms of reducing anxiety. And I think that's because it does focus my mind on not all of the the there's a lot of stimuli in London, in a busy city, and it can be very intense. And I think it's not just for work that it can focus my mind. It can just calm me in a reducing some of that stimuli.
Yeah,
Um,
do you feel you're better able to um kind of like move on from, okay, there's a distracting set of sounds, I can just kind of move on from it, as opposed to off stimulation, you might just be drawn to that sound.
I think again, noise cancelling really helps walking around the city. I go everywhere with AirPods, and particularly the noise cancelling ones. I think also knowing what works for one and what doesn't. So I'm just recognizing, okay, really loud environments are not where I want to be, or that if I do, to kind of check in with my body and self-soothe oneself to a certain extent and just breathe. And that's beyond any kind of medication, just knowing what environments, what works for me and doesn't is such a major advance and quality of life enhancement.
And when it comes to self-soothing, uh, how do you learn how to do that, and what do you do?
Um, I think I recognize there's things that I've done for a long time, like I'm always fiddling with something or playing with something between my hands, and since I was a child, and you recognize that now you I understand this is termed as a stim, these ideas that kind of stimulate you but also can calm you. So I think recognizing that there's nothing wrong with that, that it's not hurting anyone, and it's not just because it's not normal that you maybe need to move more, that accepting that, allowing yourself to do it, or I'm speaking for myself, allowing myself to move in the way I want, to sit the way I want, that's really helpful. I feel like I haven't got to the core of your question, and I really want to,
I mean,
but
I
I
think
don't exactly remember it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, well, we can leave it at that for now. We can always come back to things if I mean, I feel like you answered the question perfectly fine. If you had
Okay.
more, yeah, and we could, there's no, it's not like there's a
No,
perfect right
I
answer or
think
anything.
no, 100%. I just
Yeah.
really, I like the question, and it's interesting for me to kind of delve into and think, but happy to move on.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not that I don't there's I'm not used to doing interviews, so it's also kind of yeah, it's just I'm a little I'm constantly mildly disoriented throughout our entire
Yeah, it's all
conversation,
good.
trying to think of what to do next. So um I guess as far as the world and maybe school growing up, what made sense and what did not? I know that's a very broad question, but is there anything that stands out to you that you'd like to share?
Um, in school, what made sense? I really didn't enjoy school. I really I struggled in high school. I'm talking about in early elementary school, I enjoyed, but I have a distinct memory of like being quite young and wanting to answer every question and being like a really good student, like being offering a lot and kind of recognizing the teacher saying, okay, not you, Sam, that someone else, and then from there, kind of maybe sometimes in my past, I think I've oversteered another way. So then you don't answer or you fall back, or kind of maybe a bit of what might be termed like rejection sensitivity. So just hearing a no and then going all the way the other way instead of just kind of having that ability to understand, okay, really what they're saying is want to make space for others, but I appreciate your contribution and continue. Um, yeah, so I think as school went on, I became not such a good student. I think sometimes I maybe didn't understand why we were learning certain things, and it didn't interest me, or the way it was taught didn't work for me. And as I say, I really struggled to focus. There's loads of stuff in school that I'm very interested in, history, language. Pretty much everything really that you study, I'm deeply interested in now, and but maybe learning in a different way from others. So I think the way things were taught um, didn't work for me. Uh, it was I always felt like I was just reading and trying to write down, and I never had enough time to do anything. I would really struggle in exams to get the work done in the amount of time that you're afforded. And I think that's where having a dyslexia diagnosis would have been useful there, because it would have been afforded more time and to be able to do it in a smaller room, not a kind of big hall with this kind of intense pressure. And I feel that would have been more useful as well, because I really could have demonstrated my actual knowledge there, as opposed to kind of, I think, demonstrating some of the knowledge, but then just also you're demonstrating this, they can't see that, but the struggle you have demonstrating it in that environment. So yeah, the way maybe we were assessed, it didn't work for me. The teaching mode, I remember telling a music teacher I want to be a producer, and then telling me, um, you're not going to be able to do that unless you know music theory. And I didn't know that. I found it difficult to. I can play the guitar, but I remember getting kicked out of guitar lessons because I wouldn't practice. So just maybe like needing a different type of teaching, and probably to something that's a bit more personal, a bit more with teachers that are a bit more able to understand, take the time or have the ability to understand what that particular student needs. Um, and then, but I appreciate that, that resources are not available to do that. I love the stories where you hear about a teacher that really took an interest and saw the potential in a child and or in a teenager, and was able to help them harness that. I never really felt lucky enough to have that in my life. Someone that was a kind of could see the ability and really wanted to support it. I'm trying to think about something good, but I
No,
can't really. I'm sorry. But
it's
as I
okay. I
say,
mean, yeah,
university was a different experience, so that was much more positive.
yeah, yeah, and we can you can definitely share about that more in a moment because yeah, we'll talk more about music and your career in music. But um, no, I think I imagine a lot of people watching this would empathize and had a very similar experience. Just because I agree, there's a disconnect. It sounded like that you're speaking to a big disconnect between certain minds and the general, standard way that things are taught. Um, so yeah, I think that that does thoroughly answer my question. And again, if you have more thoughts about anything, like we can always come back to anything here. So okay, so the next set of questions have to do with music. Um, So yeah, I mean, it sounds like sounds in general maybe catch your attention. But what is it about music that caught your attention?
I'm not sure. I think I at some as I say up to around 10 I would draw a lot. Like I would make a lot of comics, and I was a pretty advanced drawer when I look at compared to other kids at the time. I just looked back when I was doing this the ADHD and autism diagnosis. I looked back on lots of stuff from my childhood, and yeah, I really loved drawing. But my dad in particular, he played music a lot, like not himself, but would play. I'd hear him playing music, and he had a pretty broad taste, but really fundamentally regardless of the genre, like great songs. And I think I really got hooked on pop music. And I can hear great pop songs in all different genres. Like punk songs have, there's great pop songs. It's all pop unless it's classical, really. And yeah, I was just really attracted to great pop songs, and I've got an amazing memory for music and lyrics, and I can remember stuff from like 92 that I heard at the time. Yeah, I remember when I was younger, that's what I'd spend all my money on. Like it would go to tape. This was when tapes were still around, and CDs, and all my money would go to, and CDs were expensive then as well. You were paying like the equivalent of like $20 for CD. It would cost like a month pocket money to buy a CD. But yeah, that's what I spend my money on. And I just as I said, liked creating. And I had a radio that you could record onto tape, and would just first started recording kind of a cappella songs, just and at 10, and then kind of had a guitar and would do that with friends. And it just kind of songwriting developed. And I found it a really cathartic way, I think, to express myself and yeah, document how I felt. I mean, a lot of the songs were really silly when I was very young, but as a teenager, I think, especially looking back now, I can um, identify what I was expressing, even if at the time I couldn't tell you this song's about this for some of them. But yeah, I really can look back at music from. I've been making it for 30 years now, and I can see it chronicling all different periods of my life. And I think the album that I'm close to finishing now, which I was originally thinking of calling Songs for the Neurodivergent, because I see this very much as a journey from like this really low time in like 2020, working this job where I was really struggling with like social situations and mental health, to this kind of journey where I kind of started. I got kind of angry, I think, when you just felt that you kind of went through very low confidence to really angry at everything. And then this point of kind of self-acceptance and general kind of alignment of different parts of myself. So it's a real nice arc. But instead, I don't really like that title, and also don't want to limit the appeal potentially to only people that identify as neurodivergent. So I'm changing it to you're a special person to me. I'm glad we met. And I think of that about all the people that I have a lot of really good friends that I really truly love, but also about myself. Want to be happy to know me and think of myself as a special person to me. So, yeah, the title's kind of a dual purpose.
Very cool. Um, and what
Are you
instruments have you played? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just was going to the next question and trying to
Oh yeah,
preempt
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Instruments, I think this is, I'm not, I'm not a fantastically technical or classically trained musician at all. I'm a really rudimentary musician in that sense. I wouldn't be a good session musician because like, someone couldn't bring me in to say, play this. I kind of do everything in a really ad hoc way, which is another challenge, I think, in terms of finding work, because people want you often to be like a really great technical mixer or um, very skilled in one area. And I kind of create by experimenting and kind of finding a way that works and I get to an outcome. And I feel sometimes that you come to a more interesting outcome. Sometimes I wish I had more technical proficiency so I could achieve the ideas more easily in my that I have in my head. And that's why partly I like this idea of this faculty where not someone doesn't need to have all the skills, but they can have the ideas, which to an extent, while technical proficiency in things is valuable, ideas to a certain extent are more unique and harder to come by. And it's easier to find someone that can play this or edit that than it is to have that novel kernel of an idea. So yeah, to answer your question, I can play the guitar to an extent. Like one of the things I gained from my degree, which was in sonic arts, and so not about technical proficiency, was a sense that anyone can play anything if you can touch it or interact with it in a way that makes it make a sound. So you can play the guitar if you can hit it, and it makes a sound that is useful for whatever you're trying to compose. I really fell in love with these machines. These are samplers, and I became very attached to them because I love the idea of being able to put in any sound and manipulate it and then sequence it. And I came up with projects in university to trigger video with them, and they're just so flexible that they're originally meant for sampling drums and kind of programming drums, but they've been used massively in hip hop for creating whole tracks. But they're yeah, so adaptable, and I love that.
Could you show us a bit of that? Here's the sampler. Is that the thing behind you?
Yeah, this is a
Whoa.
MPC drum sampler that used to be MIDI production center, and now it's music. But yeah, you can put any sound into this and manipulate it, and then sequence it. Doesn't just have to be drums, and you can play it with a keyboard or play it with the pads. Um, yeah, it's really it was re really fun.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Um, yeah, what advice would you give to people wanting to pursue a career in music, both in general and for people that are not neurotypical?
It's challenging for me to answer that in a sense because I don't feel like I have realized my own kind of not necessarily potential, but kind of the success that I want. And the success that I want is for, I think, right now, for more people to be able to hear the music. Because going back to what caught my attention, music has been something that really supported me throughout my life. When there was periods for a long time when there weren't people that I felt like could understand me in a way, or I didn't talk to them, music spoke to me in a way that was really comforting, that I felt understood by. And same with movies to a certain extent. And I think particularly of these new songs, I really feel that um, certain people would resonate with them and get value from them and feel comforted. And I know that's true to a certain extent because I've shared some with people with similar experiences to my own, and they have said that really resonates. And yeah, so what I really want is to find the way for more people to be able to hear and enjoy the music, but I've got to complete it to first to be able to do that. If I were to offer any advice, I think it would be if I were to go back to being a teenager, believe that this can be for you. I would love to go back to 17, 18-year-old Sam and think, you can do this. You can find the way to do it. I didn't have any kind of real context of how it was possible. I didn't have industry contacts, which I think is the way that a lot of people actually do succeed, unfortunately. No, I mean, unfortunately for them, it works for them. And that's good. Um, but I think now as well, there's so many different distribution opportunities and ways that exist now to get your music out there. Also, stay true, I think, to your vision and how you like to express yourself, because that's going to be the real USP. Uh, AI
USP?
can unique selling point. That's
Oh,
kind of one of the few things I do remember from school when I did business studies.
okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
your USP is your unique way of like I think seeing the world and how you express that through your music and the truer in a way that you stick to that, the less AI can replicate that because I mean, a lot of pop at the moment that isn't even produced by AI to me sounds like it was like it feels so generic and this isn't a in my day everything was better because I still hear music that I think is good contemporary music now, but I just think that actually those genuine, sincere, and nuanced expressions of human existence will become more valuable. So yeah, don't feel that you need to conform, I guess.
That's very profound. That yeah. Because I think also okay. Well, so when it comes to expressing yourself and your unique viewpoints, you know, it definitely struck me as important to talk about because to give you a brief context in my case, this my YouTube channel is just yeah, it's my unique expression, and it seems to have very resonated, but it's in some ways it can be very terrifying. And so, when you talk to your younger self, I imagine there could be a lot of anxiety from your younger self of like, how do I even do this? I mean, I don't, you could please, correct me if I'm mistaken. It's just, I can imagine younger people or just anyone trying to create something unique being very scared of how to take that next step or just be true to themselves. So is there anything you can say about how to do that? How do you face that fear? How do you, yeah, just how?
I I don't know if I could do it another way. I mean, I think if were I commissioned, for example, to write kind of a generic pop song, I think I could take that task and do it. But in terms of just like the organic way of producing music, it just flows. Like, and that's one of the things I love so much. I feel like I'm so rarely, especially as I've got older, so rarely in flow. And when music feels good, I'm just like doing it, and it comes incrementally but the words and the ideas it's not a kind of mechanical thing that's selective put this here put that there it's just an expression. I used to feel a bit down on myself like oh all these songs are really depressing like but that was my experience. I couldn't write about going partying because that wasn't really true to me. um I don't think it's a case of like I wouldn't say to someone look deep inside yourself and express what's there. I would encourage someone to make what they want to make that feels what they if they want to write if what is going on in their life is partying and even if it sounds aligned with what the kind of general um, topics of contemporary music is absolutely fine. All I'm saying is kind of that do what feels you know true to you, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think it would be contrite if someone was like concocting a kind of faux challenge or perspective on the world, a novel perspective, just to be different from it would be fantastic in a way to feel kind of more aligned with the rest of the world and not challenged more existentially by life itself and um, but for some that is their existence. I thought about this in the difference between listening to Radiohead and Oasis. Like one could think of Radiohead as like so much deeper and more, kind of this more existential dread, and people in the 90s used to talk about them being depressing. And you maybe you could see Oasis as quite superficial. It's a bit more like rock and roll stuff. But they're both expressions, I think, genuinely of those different people's experience of life. So they both have a value to me. There isn't one that's better or worse. And I also enjoy both at different times.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. The question was a bit colored um, by more selfish motives, for lack of a better word. Because I think we can certainly move on. I just wanted to explain briefly because I don't want to make you feel like you didn't answer the question fully, which you did. It's just, yeah, in my case, the genuine expression part is just has always been very hard for me because I'm always worried about what will other people think, right? And so, but it sounds, I mean, everything you're saying is basically, well, that's the creative process doesn't have to involve the judgment of other people. I think that's,
No, and
yeah.
from in my case, no one was listening, and still no one's listening. So it doesn't really
Oh,
matter
no.
because no one's consuming the music. I think we spoke about when I talked to you, there are people watching, and also we spoke about the kind of that you have a job, a public job in a sense where students might can see what you're doing, and you do demonstrate a lot of vulnerability. And from my perspective, your channel is very raw, and you being you and expressing your feelings it's in an even more unedited way, definitely than working to work. I think I could only make an alignment between my music and your channel more than say working to work, which is a bit more yeah, a different thing. But I really that's something that's very attractive. That is an art in itself. I think the way your channel way is a raw expression. I don't think it's I'm going to look deep in. I think you think about what you want to talk about, but your expression is raw. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it is in a it's that's again where there's real value in it for me, and where I can empathize, and where it doesn't matter so much if we don't work in the same profession, because there's
Yeah.
something beyond the professional aspect that is relatable in a similar way and comforting in a similar way that maybe Cat Power was, who's a musician, or music was to me. It can do it has a similar effect, basically, is what I'm saying in terms of comfort and resonance to music. Some watching some of your videos.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the kind words. And also yeah, I should mention that this is not a sponsored, there's like no sponsorship or anything because just because you happen to mention a lot of your music and I do want to encourage people to listen to your music, but it's not, there's no financial incentive here. I promise. So I'm just speaking to the
Wait,
audience,
on whose behalf?
but yeah, exactly. I mean, like yeah, who would
I'm
be
not
paying
sure
who? I don't know,
who would
but
who would pay
yeah.
who's paying who. No, and
So
also my
anyway,
music can't
yeah.
be bought either. So there is
Oh, you
no
can't. Oh, wow.
no.
Is it on YouTube
Oh,
or?
you could stream it on streaming apps, I think, but this would be kind of like 0.0000 pennies or cents or whatever. But please do if you're
Cool. Okay.
curious.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great. And then okay, so that kind of leads us into your current life. So you had mentioned coaching, which I found very interesting because I don't, I had heard it on some YouTube videos here and there, but don't really fully understand it. So you know, is it for autism or ADHD or both? And how did you go about finding a coach?
The coaching, so yeah, in this period, like early 2022, I was looking more into to neurodiversity, and I found this website called The Dots, which is kind of like LinkedIn, but meant to be like a softer version, a bit more kind of um, kind somehow. And the reason I found that was because I was reading a book about neurodivergent people that have created things, and there's the person that created this website, The Dots, which is neurodivergent in some way that I don't remember anymore. And on I was just exploring the website. I haven't used it since, but at that I kind of went to an introduction about it. They, a kind of Zoom, here's what you should do, what the Dots is about. And someone mentioned there that there's coaches available, and I didn't know really what that meant in a sense either, but I wrote on the wall, I guess. It felt like Facebook a bit, or like LinkedIn. Are there any neurodivergent coaches? And a couple of people responded to me. One who I wasn't a professional coach, just someone working in, I think they're a graphic designer, or who I kind of met up with and talked to a bit. So it wasn't a paid thing. That they just kind of they had ADHD, and we spoke a bit about our experiences. But then there's also someone that responded that had just started working as a coach, and they're autistic, and they told me about their podcast, and I listened to their podcast, and I found it really resonated with my experience, and it was yeah, it was really powerful at the time, because it really did speak to kind of my experience of the world at that point. Um, and I joined their Discord group, and eventually joined their coaching program. And the coaching program was for um, neurodivergent creatives. And there was an aspect to it where we'd have group meetings where people would talk about things bring to the coach a challenge in their life. And the coach would coach them on it, but in front of a group, which was really scary because I think doing that to a certain extent, if you haven't had experience, I speak for myself in therapy or coaching before, just doing it one-on-one, scary, and doing it in front of others. But what was really valuable, I think, was that you'd think just passively watching others would be not useful because it's not your situation, but the situations were so relatable. And that was when I went there with, an ADHD diagnosis or belief, and that partly through that, recognized the alignment I had with people that were identified or diagnosed as autistic, and how similar my experiences were. And I think for many people, that can be, again, really comforting to feel you're not alone, because I mean, an experience I've had throughout a lot of my life is just feeling I'm the only one. What is wrong with me? Like, when will I ever understand why I feel so different, and that type of thing. And yeah, it's kind of revelatory to a certain extent to uh, see yourself reflected in others, and then also to go to the coach and also develop those that build my confidence back up to feel confident enough to bring a question, and um, not need to try not to edit myself as much. It's scary in a way that this isn't going to be edited. That I think in a part that's why I became an editor, because I always kind of felt like I need to edit myself, or the way that I would naturally do things needs to be kind of tightly tightened up and stuff. And it's, I don't like going back and watching old videos that I've made for Working to Work, but I try to not delete them, or I try to accept that was what I felt was the right way to do it at the time, and leave it there. So yeah, finding a coach, I found them on the dots. What prompted me to look for it was feeling I needed some type of support that I felt would understand me, because when I'd go see the GP, the doctor, about the challenges, they would just prescribe medication for depression or for anxiety, and they've got too short a window, and I just don't think they understood fundamentally what I needed. And this coach I felt at the time, very much understood what was challenging for me and the other people in the group, and that was incredibly helpful in terms of understanding myself, understanding how to interact with the world, understanding, maybe rebuilding my belief in it was possible for me to realize the work that I wanted to do, even though it's still very difficult for anyone, I think, unless you have a lot of privilege and support or whatever, to just do whatever you want to do with your life, because we can't potentially all do that. But I wanted to try again. So that's kind of what prompted me to look for it. And specific examples of how that helped,
So I think so I have a few follow-up questions before we
please.
continue. So um one was, what was anxiety inducing about sharing your experiences? How did you manage that? And then how does coaching differ from therapy or group therapy?
Sorry, like ADHD brain is like, I mean, I've forgotten the
Yeah, yeah,
difference.
yeah.
It was
So we'll
three
do, yeah,
questions.
one.
The, the
So yeah,
first was,
we'll just do one. The first one is just, yeah. So yeah, what was anxiety, and like, what
uh,
you said it was
I,
scary to talk about
I think
things in
being
coaching.
visible was scary. Being on video at that time felt really scary, kind of being in front of a camera. it felt safer to, have the camera off. Some people had the camera off and were encouraged to have the camera on for better connection and trust, but also to, I think, to build that muscle of being comfortable. I certainly felt uncomfortable. Um, Also, that it's new. It was for me. I can't speak for anyone else, but it's new to bring um, a challenge to something that's challenging to me to someone else, regardless of being other people. Had never had coaching before, so I didn't know how that would work. I mean, I'd seen other people, but um, yeah, those aspects I think were difficult initially. Also, is it was a challenge to lean into it being okay to communicate however felt natural to me. So, for example, I can imagine the way you and I are talking, like I think this is my authentic way of talking, but this in job interviews, for example, has not worked well because they do really want succinct, like stories, the STAR method, situation, task,
What is the
action.
STAR method?
I think it's like, what was the situation? What was the task? What was the action? And what was the response? Basically, like, what was the problem? How did you address it? What did you do? What was the outcome? Like every story is meant to be, in my previous job, a
Interesting.
really nice rounded story, and mine, without a very specific question, I think the way you can diverge off into all these different parts, and sometimes find it more difficult. I find it challenging to identify, okay, what are the core things that someone needs to know to be able to understand this? Because I think all aspects are important, all the parts of a thing, as opposed to just this one bit, is important, and it's difficult to say, okay, well, I won't talk about those bits. So just being it feeling into it being okay, however, um, I expressed the thing, and the coach was very good at encouraging you to, that it's okay, however you communicate this.
Yeah. And then I hear some parallels to therapy or group therapy, the way that you described coaching. So where does it differ?
I've never done group therapy, so I couldn't
Okay.
say really.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. Um, and then are there any specific examples that maybe I don't know, someone else shared or that you shared that you felt like was kind of helped a lot in the moment with the coach?
Um, I I'd be lying if I said I could remember an example. Sorry, maybe perhaps I should have thought about this before, but I'm not even sure I even with pre-thought I could think of one particular example.
No
Uh,
problem. Yeah.
I think it's just the main thing was seeing potentially your challenges reflected back, but also it was very constructive. So it wasn't a case of, oh, that sounds, there's an aspect of empathy there, but there's also very much like constructive support in terms of how one might approach uh, resolving or mitigating or working with a challenge, but they were very big on the answers being inside the coachee. So they weren't prescriptive at all, and they would pose questions more than kind of say this is what you should do. And it was the questions that kind of teased out that person being able to identify the route that they wanted to take. And I think that's why they're a coach, because the coach doesn't go on the field and play the game. They kind of get the best out of or enable that person, a facilitator of the the answers in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you encourage people to look for a coach, and was cost a factor?
Um, I would encourage people to look for a coach if, from what I've said or independent research that they do, they think that might be something that is useful. I think I was very much at a really low point where I really recognized I needed help that the NHS, the your local doctor was not able to provide, and the mental health services were not able to provide because they just weren't at that time equipped to support or able to identify what I needed. And I was determined at that point that like it'd been long enough, a long enough life without, and with this sense of neurodivergence and neurodiversity, that I had something to hang on to, that I felt this is the way to research to go. Like I wanted for years, I would have, I think, tried to find the answers to why I was unhappy, why things weren't working out, why it was so challenging, but I didn't know what to search or what route to go. I would look at individual challenges I was having or things I didn't like about myself or behavior patterns, but they were all part of this big, I needed to understand a bigger picture in a way than solve one individual thing. So I think if it resonates or it feels might be useful. In terms of cost, it was relatively affordable at the time. Um, Sorry, it was just really dimming and you were getting, it was like the sun was setting on you. Um, and I was fortunate. My dad was willing to give me some money to pay for it. But yeah, it was affordable at the time. They were starting out. Um, I think it's more expensive now. Um, yeah, I guess everyone's situation is different in terms of what they can afford. And yeah, hopefully there's someone, if you can't afford it in one's life, that if one says this, I think would be really useful for me. This is going to be, it is a good use of money, I think. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great. Okay. Um, and then the next set of questions have to do with your channel, Working to Work. And yeah, as mentioned earlier, I'll put a link to that in the description, and maybe even some example interviews that I particularly enjoyed. Um, so right, so I mean, yeah, what's your channel about? And it will always start with that. What's your channel about?
So the channel, as I say, I came out of this really difficult situation in the an employment in 2022, and at that time, I really wanted to kind of make a radio piece or some kind of, my response to life challenges is to make something about it, whether it be music or whatever. It's just to document it creatively somehow. And I kind of guess at that point, probably want to make some angry piece about what wasn't right here, or but then I think I kind of veered into thinking like a bit more constructively and wanting to explore more what were the different challenges I feel that I'd experienced um, in work, in terms of feeling kind of misunderstood, in terms of like getting into working really hard, having the ability, but still getting into fractious situations with employers sometimes, in terms of like misaligned values and ways of working. And I wanted to explore that. And the more, I say, a lot of these things came together at the same time, the more I understood about neurodivergence and different sensibilities and behaviors, and learned from the coaching group, the more I recognized this is not unique to me. A lot of the challenges I've had are shared by others that with similar characteristics. So I wanted to explore the intersection of neurodivergence and employment. Like, what are the skills that people have that are not being recognized? What are the challenges and barriers that stop people being able to obtain and maintain work that works for them? What can be done? And I focus primarily, I guess, on the creative realm because that's what I know the most. So musicians and artists I've spoken to academics, people that run organizations that work with autistic people, in particular in terms of work, and other neurodivergent people with other neurodivergent conditions. And really, I just at this point I sought funding for it for a long time, but I was unsuccessful. It's hard, I think, to convey to some people why you think something's important and the belief you have in it and what your vision is for why this would be beneficial. But that's okay. But it's a YouTube channel. It's podcasted, and it's also broadcast on a community radio station called Resonance, which also broadcasts worldwide as well, online. So I really wanted to find as many kind of outlets for it as possible. It's completely unfunded and just something that I think, to an extent, like with your channel that you're passionate about, and you do because it's useful for yourself and you think it's of potentially of benefit to others. But in particular with this project, I wanted its reach to be as big as possible. So I tried to find as many platforms as possible. And I'm not seeking funding for it anymore. I think that's consumed a lot of time and kind of took a lot of the joy out of the project. And it feels much more enjoyable now to be identifying different people that I'd like to talk to and arranging that and kind of doing it on a much more ad hoc basis, maybe a bit again like your channel. And I've got like a real diverse sense of people that I want to speak to. There's a grime artist called Gigs that's from South London that I would love to speak
What's
to,
a
who's
grime artist?
grime is a genre of music, kind of subgenre of rap. Um,
Okay.
and he's recently come out talking about being autistic and gaining a diagnosis after his son um, uh, was diagnosed. So I'd love to talk to him. I've got a interview arranged with Stephen Timms, who's an MP and a minister in the UK for disabilities. So that'd be quite a high profile interview that I've been planning or kind of coordinating since February. It takes a long time to kind of get these high level in inverted commas people. Um, but yeah, I really just try and I think all the time or hear something and think, oh, that'd be a great person to speak to that I really go on who I'm interested in and kind of select based on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it really shows. And I think I want to start diverging a little bit from the list of questions I have, just because um, I'm just generally interested in you as a person. And you mentioned that you had gone through this your arc, your kind of uh, your personal story. You went from you had depression, and then you went through this kind of angry stage, and then now you feel like you're in a much more stable place, as for lack of a better word. So, what was the anger about? And yeah, we'll start with that. Where did the anger come from? And do you think that was actually a product of was that a symptom of improvement?
But when I talk about this particular arc, I was thinking in terms of the album, which kind of document this like songs written in the last 5 years, and it's really documenting those 5 years. I mean, I haven't just all written them all in the last week or so. Like they've been written over the period of the last 5 years, and I can hear kind of the progression and the change in terms of how I understand myself or what I'm experiencing. Um, so the first song's called Social Bad, and that's kind of very much about like challenges with feeling one needs to conform and contort to what people at work wanted. I perceived people at work wanted you to be like communicate in a certain way, behave in a certain way that didn't feel authentic or didn't feel good to me, and kind of the challenges and the sadness in that. And um, I think in terms of there's maybe more angry moments where you're feeling resentment towards parents or people that didn't kind of appreciate you as you. But I think there's one song where I'm maybe speaking a bit about that, but also recognizing again, like I spoke about, that someone's doing their best and uh, being being sympathetic to that. So even in songs that are maybe sound slightly bitter, or there's some greater awareness there. I think fundamentally that's the biggest thing that I've gained in the last 5 years is just greater self-awareness of um, and knowledge of self, like understanding my experience and how that's just so useful. I think the anger is why didn't I know this before? Why did no one, there's a lashing out. I think I'm not a perfect person. I can definitely, especially in the past, can feel resentment to you should have recognized this or you should have done that. Or I think in the past I felt a lot of shoulds. I try to not think in terms of should in anything, like someone should have done this. Like if they don't, they don't. There isn't a should anymore. And yeah, I think the latter part of the album is much more kind of, as I say, coming to at peace with things more. I'm trying to answer your question, but it really does relate to the album as well. So the there's a song called Aligned, which is very much about it's kind of a conversation with myself, with two parts of myself, where one's saying, uh, I tried to love you effectively, and then another part saying, you're always hating me, and then wanting to find an alignment between these different parts that feel so disparate in order to be able to thrive, because without finding that alignment, they both rust, and they and as a separate point, I've always felt these different parts, and recognizing that they're all a part of myself and kind of bringing those together has felt really, really useful. Um,
That's so interesting. So it sounds like the process of writing and creating these songs actually helped you um, get to that point of acceptance. Is that accurate, or is or was there more involved to get to this point of accepting who you are?
I think it's the other way around. I think it's in a sense it's that work then kind of manifests in writing a song that kind of is able to uh, um, express that journey. But the first part of the song was written uh, pre-pandemic actually. So I think what I like about that particular song, Aligned, is that there's actually even an arc in terms of like the writing it. Actually, I was in that moment, and then I'm able to finish it, where I can see kind of where that ends and where that um this is really poorly explained. I wouldn't be able to decipher what I'm saying here. um I think
It's
I'll
okay to
just leave
take a
that one
moment
there.
to rephrase if you
Yeah,
like. It's okay.
what am I trying to say? It's okay.
Okay. I mean, because I mean, for me, you know, for me, a lot of it had to do with therapy, right? I mean, as far as going like accepting who I am, and then and getting moving past the potential and whatever angry moments I might have had about my past, myself, people in my past. Um, so my process typically doesn't involve actually, well, it involves writing, but not in terms of music. So I do some writing. And so I guess I'm curious about the process that you take to resolve inner conflict, to um, to make sense of the world. Is songwriting a big part of that?
I I think it's been an unconscious part of it. So as I say, like I look back on songs. This album is not complete, but I can look back on the album that I released in 2020, and I can understand now more like what I was expressing there. I mean, to a certain extent, I knew what I was expressing in those songs, but even songs that I wrote when I was a teenager, I can kind of decipher what was going on there. But it's not a kind of conscious, most of the songwriting is not a conscious expression of this thing I'm feeling particularly. Or it doesn't feel like that to me. It just feels like writing, and then when one looks back in hindsight, it's like, oh yes, like I kind of, and one could say you're just ascribing meaning to it that wasn't there, but I feel it's like reflective of I mean, I wrote it as well, so I feel like as, if someone's going to interpret it, like it's justified for me to interpret it in this way.
So there's something very interesting that, yeah, it seems like you've always been able to just express yourself as you are in the moment, one way or another. You just you express yourself so genuinely to the point that later on you can actually see very clearly what you were feeling in that moment. Is that accurate?
I would say the music from the past is a bit more opaque, and I have to decipher it a bit more. Um, Whereas now, I think the music that I'm writing on the lyrics are a bit more clear in terms of what I'm trying to express. And I think sometimes that's a bit of a defense mechanism to not to write in a, or maybe it's a stylistic thing to write in a less. clear way. I don't know if that
So
answers your question, or if it's always actually true, to be honest, if I think back to some
so
of the music.
so it's like you've gotten better at expressing yourself genuinely. I don't know, I just there's a to me initially it feels like there's a disconnect of like on the one hand you're it sounds like you've never really had trouble um displaying your your state of being through music, let's say. But on the other hand, when you mentioned coaching, you mentioned that it was actually very hard to share about your experiences. Um, and so to me, not that there is actually a disconnect, but it's just to me, it's like
The music is
it's very
coded though. The music is not like this is what's going on and t saying it in front of people in a very kind of vulnerable way. I mean, you have an artistic license, I think, where like in music, that it's and also I think there's something that's much more vulnerable about the contemporary music that I'm making, the songs I've written now, because they're just much more clear in terms of like, this is what I'm saying, this is what I'm feeling, that can make you, that can be seen as twee or it could be embarrassing because you're expressing kind of anger in a really kind of transparent way, whereas it's not masked in other music in like similes or uh,
I see. So
yeah.
you're older. This is great. So I mean, so you're older. And again, like, please, you don't have to answer anything that you feel uncomfortable about because this is getting a little personal. But
Just so you know, it's not that I feel uncomfortable. It's more just trying to think about how best to answer the question. I feel absolutely fine with answering all the questions.
great. Okay. Okay. Um, so I think, and this is also me taking this is the process I take to just understand someone. So there's going to be some kind of what feels like um like we're not in sync, but like this is, I mean, this is it's pretty standard if we're trying to communicate uh, different ways of thinking. So um it sounds like your earlier music, you are able to tell what you were trying to say or what you were feeling. But it sounds like maybe other people would have a harder time figuring that out. Is that what you're
Yeah, that's
thinking?
what I'm
Yeah.
saying. And I think as well,
Okay.
like there was a period in the late 2000s, early 2010s, where I was making a lot of instrumental sample-based music, which I feel is still imbued with how I was feeling at different times. I mean, some is there, but doesn't even have words that are expressing this is how I feel, this is my experience. It's just you'd have to resonate with it sonically to or interpret it in and that's even more kind of opaque or kind of subjective. Um,
So
yeah.
your music has gone from only you being able to interpret what you were feeling at the time to it sounds like you're being a lot more open, a lot more vulnerable, and more explicit. Is that, yeah.
I think it's gone in a wave. Whereas when I was a teenager, it was probably in a similar way to how it is now, where it's very raw and expressive and clear to a certain extent. And then it went into a kind of, okay, I'm uh, not writing conventional songs. I'm kind of experimenting and making kind of basically sound collages of sorts that are exercising that desire to create and express myself and experiment. But yeah, they're not so overt in expressing an experience necessarily to back to kind of more songwriting and clearly um, working through um, times and experiences.
And that's so that through the upswing back to being this more, clear expression. I mean, you had mentioned it's maybe it could be even embarrassing.
Mm.
So, I mean, why go through the trouble? What what prompted you to make this change? Or was there anything?
I
Yeah,
think,
sorry.
yeah,
That's way too specific. We'll leave it at the what
I don't mind
like
answering the
why
question.
go through the trouble, I guess. We'll start with that one.
I think just naturally started writing more songs again, as opposed to playing around with samplers. So that just organically happened. I think, as I say, no one's really listening. This is definitely not an ad or paid by either me
Yeah.
paying you or you paying me
Yeah.
for this. So, and so I don't really need to worry at this point. And thirdly, if people were to listen, I just feel much braver than I have in the past. That it would be fantastic if people heard and I was able to speak about what the songs meant, because I feel like that's the kind of thing that a younger me would love to see someone talking about experiences that potentially resonate with them. So I just have less fear in that sense, not just fear of physical attack, but fear of being me. And if someone into like think I like I mentioned to you when we spoke last time, that idea of that I got from my coach, which was one of the things that really stuck with me, of let people be wrong about you. Like I really lean into that now. It's like I don't have that desire to tell people or convince people they're wrong with how they perceive me, or I'm okay with it, and uh, I don't care as much anymore.
Yeah. And that change is fascinating to me. And I and I hope it's worthwhile for you to talk about it too. Because, if this, yeah, so just the go, because okay, so the coach said this very helpful thing that let people be wrong about you. Um, do you think that you would have taken that advice to heart when you were a teenager, let's say, or like in your tw early 20s?
I think that would have been a really amazing thing to hear someone say, because I think I spent a lot of my 20s and teens and probably early 30s like feeling misunderstood and feeling it really imperative to correct them, to understand what I meant. And like it takes up so much energy. And the more you protest, like the more it sounds like you're defending, being defensive. And it's just like, fuck it. Like whatever. Like, and also it's like that people are going to interpret these how also what is helpful for me is to try to be able to feel, okay, what I'm saying is true to what I'm trying to express, and in the best, clearest way possible that I can. And if also trying not to second guess what people might come back with, because I would give a lot of maybe sometimes be more expansive in my answers, because I'm trying to um, uh, answer things that I think might come up, or challenges that I might get to something I'm saying ahead of time, so I'm not misinterpreted, so someone doesn't get the wrong impression about me or how. And like just being okay with if that. And rarely, a lot of times it just is in my head. They don't necessarily. I think I've had interactions where I have felt reinterpreted. They have a perception of me a certain way, and like I talked about in being a kid and oversteering when someone says let someone else answer, perhaps like I've taken those to heart, and then um, yeah, reacted like that more and more as a defense mechanism where it wasn't necessary, like extrapolated that needs to be, I always need to be 100% clear and give tons of disclaimers and um, additional
So
information.
I there must be situations where it does matter that you take the time and energy to explain, because maybe there was a misconception that you feel needs correcting. So how
Hmm.
do you decide when you just let it go versus when you actually take the time and energy to correct something?
I think I haven't really been in the situation recently where I've had that come up. I think I've done a lot of growing in the last few years that I haven't been maybe working in a formal sense, where that I haven't necessarily needed to fully implement or be challenged in terms of being able to recognize, okay, how much have I grown? How can I actually respond? Well, can I respond in a different way uh, to the challenges that I've experienced before, if that makes sense. So it's kind of T TBC in a way. Um,
TBC.
like not TBC, but I'll find out, I guess.
Oh,
And
TBD?
TBD, to be determined.
To
Yeah,
be
thank you.
determined. Yeah.
But in terms of like when to correct, I think when I feel it's necessary. I know that's not useful, and I don't wouldn't want to give like a, this is when you should do it. That's not when you shouldn't. I guess when you feel that it's necessary for someone to be understand what you
Yeah, yeah.
meant.
So it's very case by case. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So if there's
Like
no
if I, like
particular
if for example, if I expressed something and someone had their perception was okay, that sound they perceive that sounds sexist or something like that, or that sounds some kind of ist, and that wasn't my point, that that isn't me, and that isn't what I was expressing. I was just expressing a viewpoint. A lot of time it's that person is taking in that information as well, running it through their mind and the way they interpret things, and maybe not listening to the nuances of what you're saying, or not used to being challenged on a perspective or something. But I don't. I think I know who I am, and the people that. This is not, by the way, me saying I'm not willing to be challenged. I really enjoy it. Like I like you asking me questions. I'm happy to engage like that. But when feeling kind of like accused or something like that, or that it's okay to let people think what they want to a
interesting.
certain extent.
So wow, yeah, because
But
okay,
this
so
rarely comes up.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
there was one instant when I was in San Francisco that I really remember. I was explaining a situation and someone telling me, "Oh, that's because you're a man that you perceive it like this," and I just didn't think that what I was saying was anything to do with that particularly. And I guess like in that instance, from thinking about now, well, it's okay for them to perceive that in that way and me to feel this way. I just don't want to necessarily feel a need to convince them. Like I don't want to change anyone's mind that doesn't want to be changed or feel it's a lot of energy.
Yeah, so because
And I,
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead,
that's
please.
it. No,
I
that's
mean,
I'm done.
so the feeling of wanting to fix a misconception could be very strong initially. Is
Mhm.
that sounds like it?
Yes.
But I mean, did it really all stem from just that advice of let people be wrong about you?
No, I think all of these things have coalesced into kind of a greater sense of like trust in myself. I think but in 2020, I had a very, around that time, 2021, a real low ebb. And maybe if those that have experienced depression can resonate with this, that your confidence is very low as well. And you can start to outsource, like, what should I do about this to others, and instead of like trusting oneself. And like, I think I've rebuilt that, which really helps. But also just the phrase is useful when I remember it, like in terms of all sorts of things, to like I've got a finite amount of time, like I just don't, and there's no real benefit from like convincing one person that of some like with like not just about how one feels about how they're perceiving me, but anything, like convince them of a perspective I have on the world. I don't want to continue, I'll have a discourse with someone and debate if they want, but I don't need someone to see the thing, the world, the way I see it. That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And it'd be boring if they did all see the world the way I do.
And yeah, so the advice was one thing because you said things have coalesced, and so you've got become this person due to multiple factors.
Yeah.
So one that advice is certainly helpful, and it certainly is a good reminder. But I mean, I'd like to get some sense of you were lower or feeling lower in 21. Um, what and then what helped you move past? Was it the diagnosis, the cycle
Sorry,
help?
you're breaking up a bit. I heard your
Yep.
lower.
So you were lower in 2021, like
Yeah,
post-pandemic, it sounded like. So you're
pre
struggling
like
with that and
mid pandemic. Yeah.
mid-pandemic. So
Yeah.
yeah, so what caused it and what helped you get better, feel better?
I think an accumulation of difficult experiences over an extended amount of time. So it wasn't just like this one job. Like it was all sorts of situations that had been difficult. You know, I used to think, oh, this has been a difficult year, years ago, and then realized every year seems really difficult. Like there'll be some, external bad things that happened, but just in terms of like how I felt mentally. And I think that's when one realizes, or I realized, like this doesn't feel right. Like I don't feel like every year should feel like such a struggle. Um,
What were the things that contributed to the difficulty?
I think interpersonal challenges in relationships that didn't go well. I think, yeah, challenges in terms of feeling one is capable and has a lot to offer, and in my mind, that is doing the right things, but the response from the world is not aligned with what the energy I'm feeling giving out. I think in terms of the job, a loss of trust in the people that I was working with or working for, just not feeling aligned with um, the company, and um, overworking. You know, I'd work a lot, but and just, I mean, I stopped medication and the medication very much kind of uh, reduced my emotional kind of highs and lows. And when I stopped that prior to restarting stimulants, like my kind of emotions were all over the place. Like I would be crying. There was a week where in September 2021 where I just could not stop crying, and I would go meet a friend and I was just crying, and I couldn't stop it. I've never felt as emotional and at that point like hopeless. And what helped was I made a friend through a friend that is also ADHD, and she was just so empathetic and understanding of um, and warm and open to me expressing what was going on, and she really got it. And I think that was the point where I really recognized like the value of having people close to me that allowed you to be you and appreciated you as you, and also just the love that she offered at that point. It was so amazing. And and then you recognize it in other friends I've had in the past, that those similar characteristics. But at that point, that one particular person was incredibly helpful. Not talking about neurodiversity or any real condition or anything, just that the communication was aligned, and the support and the the desire to build up to care for me was immensely valuable. Um,
That's
I mean, that's a
wonderful.
kind of key thing that helped. All of the things we've discussed here subsequently have helped as well. But just in that moment, in terms of feeling, and that was probably, I feel like, the lowest. That's where I felt hopeless. I think hopeless is the worst human state. Like there's depression, but below depression is hopeless, where you lose that sense that things can get better. When I went to the GP and said there's nothing, just take continue taking antidepressants. I talked to her about referring me for ADHD. I told her I've been kind of flagged or for an autism screening before or whatever. Like, but just that she wouldn't do anything, and it seemed like this was the only way. It just made me feel that there was. I didn't feel like suicidal. I just felt hopeless, I think, which at that point, yeah.
Yeah, like there's no point.
There's no
Um,
point. I think for a lot of that period, that's exactly how I'd sum it up. Like there's just no point. Like, what's the
yeah,
point? I felt very, very like give or take life, like whatever.
yeah, and there's something really important you mentioned that yeah, you were doing things to the best of your abilities, and the world was telling you otherwise, that maybe you weren't doing well enough or doing the right things. And it sounded like you kept trying and were getting this very negative feedback.
The world was
So
telling me the work was good, but the world was telling me who I perceived. The world was telling me who I wasn't good enough. Like
Yeah,
I
which
don't,
is
the
that
world wasn't really, and partly the you can't get the opportunities without someone kind of believing in you as a person or seeing you as aligned with the company culture or this and that. So that stops one from getting opportunities to be able to demonstrate your ability or your work ethic and these things. These things I don't perceive as challenges of mine.
I see. Yeah, that's right. So the right. And imagine the statement about you as a person from the world can be very demoralizing. Um,
Yeah, and this was literal as well. Like in the job around the time I left this job because I felt really in this is 2022, so kind of coming out of that period back in more into the anger phase, unmedicated, a lot of wild emotions. I was told, in a review that I couldn't be promoted because I wasn't good. Couldn't work with a higher management or whatever, or kind of like basically like how you naturally, and maybe at that time to this person, to be fair, like I wasn't the most stable and wasn't the best demonstration, I think, of me at my best. In terms of being able to collaborate or be diplomatic, maybe. But I also think that there's organizations that don't like to be challenged or management that doesn't don't like you to ask questions because they have different motives or it's just an inconvenience for them to have their decisions challenged constructively.
yeah,
And that and that can be
that
interpreted as being obtuse and where it's really not. You're actually just trying to do your job.
yeah. I feel like there's a whole can of worms there.
That's what working to
Because
work was a kind of originally for. I kind of
okay,
haven't gone so much into that, but yeah.
I see. Yeah, and the frustration that comes with that, it's there's no easy resolution, right? You can't.
Especially when it affects your compensation as well. Like this was a factor in terms of why I didn't get a raise in line with how I felt I was performing. And I was told I was performing in terms of the work I was producing and collaboration with my peers well, but in terms of this aspect, um, so that's challenging because to a certain
Yeah,
extent, that's discrimination against a different way of interacting. There's people in work that can be much more, not affable, that's not the word, but or passive. I can't think of a word, but congenial potentially in with how that suits management that don't want to be challenged. And in some ways, you could be producing less, offering less in a way, but go higher because you're less of a challenge to the people in those positions.
that's I yeah. If that stuff drives me insane. The
Yeah,
political
I mean,
game
as I
over.
say,
Yeah.
it drove me mad, and hence leaving. And yeah,
Yeah. Um, uh, so so it sounds like I mean, there's nothing you can do about such a like if you are in such a company, it sounds like there's no recourse but to either leave or be submissive. I mean, is that kind of what you thought too, or
well, in that instance, I challenged the well, I tried to speak to HR. At that, I'm quite if you tell me a sector of the company is there for something, I believed it. I hadn't worked actually in a kind of a job like that before with where you're kind of staff for a long time with all these different departments. And I believed that HR were really there to support staff. So I went, to say this doesn't feel right for these reasons. Can it be re-reviewed? And they did some type of they said no, it can't be re-reviewed. The yearly review, the salary review, or whatever. Um, but it could be. After I'd left, they actually did do that in an investigation because I challenged it. But at that point, I'd already left. I wasn't told about any mechanisms that you could use to challenge this. I wasn't given, only after I left did I find out that you can challenge it. All I was told was nothing can be done. And at that point, I felt, well, I can't stay at a job where I'm not. And also, this review did find that the percentage I was offered was not in line with the work that I had done. So I was right, even
oh
though I
my
felt it should be higher. And I got union involved in this because my dad described it as constructive dismissal, which I don't know if you've heard this term, but effectively, I wasn't fired. I quit, but I quit because I felt I can't stay in a role where they're like not going to be fair.
Right.
It felt like untenable. Um, but yeah, the review found that it actually wasn't accurate. But by that point, I'd left. It was a really difficult situation, a very difficult situation.
Were there any red flags that felt like maybe you should have noticed earlier at any point working for the company?
I yeah, I think I was so emotional at the time, and angry. I think now I can reflect, and if I'm again want to be fair, which I don't think I really definitely owe them because they did definitely treated me like shit, and people that were not me, that were my colleagues, also recognized that I was treated like shit. But I was emotional at that point. Probably if it were now, I feel so much more collected and able to probably respond and also think about what I want from a situation as opposed to I could be quite righteous and maybe like need to be a bit more not diplomatic, but what's going to work for me. But again, I tried to use the mechanisms of business, going to HR, and subsequently, after leaving the job, all my friends that I spoke to about this said, "No, Sam, HR aren't there for you. They're there to protect the company." My dad said that. I had no sense of that. I thought HR, a human resource. In fact, in this company, they called it the people team, which sounds even softer and sweeter. Like, so I thought you go there and they're going to be supportive of you. And they really weren't, and they did a terrible job, and I still feel that. Um, and I had colleagues that spoke to them because they felt that they'd done a terrible job and really let me down as well. And it really knocked me, that experience. And as I say, it wasn't just that. I had bad experiences at work, but I also had positive experiences at work. It hasn't been all bad by any means, but that particular experience was very damaging. And it's taken 3 years really to kind of recover confidence and trust in myself. But from it, maybe if that hadn't happened, maybe I wouldn't be where I am now. Maybe you and I wouldn't be talking. I wouldn't feel like in a kind of second wind in life where you kind of have to start again, but I'm starting again feeling like with way more tools, and I still have the ability, and I just have just much greater sense of self, and that's valuable. But it was damaging. But maybe that felt like the lowest. That's it was. It felt like a point I can't go on anymore like this. Like this is the lowest low in terms of like mental stress that I can take before kind of being committed or something like that. And but I think I found it very difficult because the company espouses being really, they've got all these values, like a lot of tech companies, we're all about this, we're all about people, like this is our mission, this and that, we're compassionate. And really, I'm very much like interested in like that, whether it's demonstrated through actions, not through words. And I can't speak for other places, but in my experience, this wasn't demonstrated, at least to me, in actions. It was only words.
Do you have more time to chat? Because it's been 2 hours. That was the original scheduled time. Do you have, okay.
Yeah.
Because I think this is a really important topic because, yeah, I mean, so also was this company meant to be kind of a long-term career path?
That it was. I don't know how much you're saying this, but again, it's just one of those things where someone could be watching, but at the same time, I wrote like a very critical review on Glassdoor of this company, which is, you do it anonymously, but it's clear like who that person came from, who it came from, because it was so specific. So if anyone searches Blinkist on Glassdoor and scrolls down to a very long review, you'll be able to find it. Um, the I think I don't want to sound ungrateful. I was grateful to get the job, and there were aspects of the job that were interesting to me. I liked collaborating with some of my colleagues there. I liked learning kind of really how like a tech company worked, a startup worked. Yeah, I saw it. a different type of organization, which was interesting to me. But fundamentally, I think at that point, uh, it was early 2020, January 2020. I really wanted stability. I wanted stable work, to be well compensated, to feel, have a better quality of life, to feel comfortable. So while I didn't feel like this is my dream job, I'm so aligned with the mission. And I don't really particularly think anyone working there was massively aligned with the mission, because I think fundamentally, like a lot of companies, the mission is to make money, and not in a really crude way, but you can have some kind of good intent as well. But fundamentally, it's like have a profitable business, or have a business that looks profitable enough to be sold, which is actually what happened for them, or acquired. Um, but yeah, it offered that at the time, and did offer like me to be able to demonstrate different abilities, and my abilities were really appreciated, like my technical abilities, my ability working with others, and I appreciated that and appreciated being compensated. But I didn't ever feel like this is the job I want to be doing forever. If I could go back, I would have maintained the work, pulled back a bit because I was overworking, and just keep, being more quiet in a sense. Just accepted this is not good. But I can do. I could have reduced how much I did, and it would still be seen as you're doing very well, doing a lot, and sought other work or something else or a next point at the same time. But it was too messy a time to be able to do that. There was too many, and I had to leave. I couldn't stay at that point.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I just asked it just because um I think that just adds to the discomfort of everything of yeah, you wanted stability and then you lose it. Um,
Yeah, it went so badly
so
wrong.
so you've left and you're in this in a very difficult mental place and you have to somehow figure out how to even start picking up the pieces. It sounded like your friend was a big part of that. Your friend, but I mean, was that is that accurate? But like, what did you start doing? What was the first you're in? Like, where do you even go from there?
I think what I started doing was I started the coaching afterwards. And the unfortunate thing is that coaching would have been incredibly useful while at the job. And I'd kind of engineered a position in the company that was you're afforded actually budget to have a coach, like it could have been an external coach. So that would be incredible. I could have had them to pay for support for me to kind of be able to manage working there effectively more than anything. Um, but yeah, I basically started the coaching, which was useful, and I was very broken at that point. Like really, very, that's the only way I could really describe it, and I probably did describe it like that. But that really helped. Um, I think, as I said, initially I wanted to lash out and kind of this is all the terrible things that happened at this place, and then gradually in my mind it became making a one-off piece about neurodivergent experiences in work, and then evolved into kind of interview series, or project. I tried to lean into, yeah, believing like that I got, from the coaching that I could get funding and do my own create my own work, because I mean this company was effectively started by someone. Every company was. The university you work for, someone created it at some point. I think the
Right.
thing is there's a lot of privilege in these things. That this company had support from Deutsche Bank or whatever, or big people were in positions where they're fortunate enough to have that monetary support or advice or whatever they need. Um, anyway, so I sought funding for working to work. That took a lot of time. Kind of, this is draining down savings. That job was paid pretty well, and it was during COVID as well, so I didn't have a huge amount of expenses. So I was able to kind of live, frugally, but okay, pursuing grant funding. Um, but yeah, that's very difficult as well to realize. I think it can sound like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do what I want to do now. Like I'm going to believe in myself, but that still requires a lot of the time, unless you have all the resources, external support to, to a certain extent to, and also for that thing that you want to do to have an audience that is receptive to it and able to pay money or I don't know if this is kind of what you were going to, but yeah, I spent maybe a year and a half seeking funding for um, doing freelance. I did freelance projects as well, audio production projects. I think more and more I recognized that isn't what I want to do anymore, though. That, as I say, it's something I can do, but it's something I did for a long time, producing, working other people's projects and editing or doing sound design for. And I I really genuinely just love the idea of Creative Harbor, supporting other people's creative development, and then really pursuing my own creative um, ideas.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm trying to do now.
Yeah. Um, how did you, I mean, it's easy to fall into this trap of being bitter and lashing out and just staying like that. But you turned it into something really nice, which is your working to work channel, something very positive that I feel can help a lot of people. So is that, do you think that was just a result of your temperament? I mean, why even, I just feel like, I mean, it's just in general, it's just, it's easy to fall into this trap of staying bitter and not making anything productive out of it. But you chose to create working to work from this experience. Um, I guess just yeah, just why?
I think being staying bitter wouldn't move me forward at all. So like in terms of like I tried even in this Glassdoor review that kind of like served the purpose of that maybe the songs do. And the two of the songs in this album, Social Bad and one called Calm, are kind of describe the experiences and emotions related to the challenges at this job. So I did kind of exercise those in those songs, and then also in that long, lengthy, verbose review. So once that's kind of done, like this just feels counterproductive to kind of retain that. But I did for a long time. Like I almost lost a friendship over it. Someone that was still there and seen held in really high regard. And I had a very good friendship with this person. And similarly to the other person I mentioned that was really great for me, this person was incredibly empathetic and kind. But I really resented her at the time for she was equally could be challenging to to the management, but because she was an engineer, I think, and somehow engineers were, it was a time before all the layoffs of kind of developers and stuff in tech companies where they were, paid very well and held in very high regard, and still are, I imagine. She was just so valuable. And that annoyed me as well because you need all the different skills to be able to create something. And that annoyed me about the company that it really didn't it seem to care like what the content was, just as long as it's some sludge in a container. Not sludge. But now it's all made by AI. I mean, there is still bitterness in me for sure, but I just manage it because I just try and take this, just try not to care. But I cared for a long time, and it was I stopped being bitter because it was hurting me more, and which goes back to what I said before, and my dad always tried to say to me is like, do the thing that's going to be beneficial for you, not in like a selfish way, but it's not beneficial for me to hold on to this bitterness, to have them living in my head. They're not paying me anymore. Why? And it doesn't do, it just rots my brain to just, and I would ruminate over and over. It took a long time. I say, I almost lost a friend. It did change our relationship that um, I wasn't as kind to her, or just couldn't control the frustration I felt at the company, and would see her at that time as a representative, even though she was completely aligned with and sympathetic to my situation, and would speak on my behalf to the CEO and etc. It was, yeah. Does that answer the
And
question?
yeah. And with regards to, because I've always had this issue too of ruminating and kind of hanging out to, sorry, my cats are kind of pawing at each other. Break that up. Um, uh, sorry.
What did you do to break it up? Did you just put the hand in between the two of them?
I just poked one of them. And
Oh,
they're
okay.
still going at it a little, but it's not. They're just kind of gently they're litter mates. And they're just kind of bickering a little bit. But for a very, very long time, maybe even to this day, I have trouble breaking out of that bitterness and kind of holding on to the anger because it's there. You know, the emotion's there. It's easy for it to resurface. Um, yeah, what steps did you take? What was the process to being able to just do something else besides ruminate?
As I say, writing the Glassdoor review, which took me ages, which again, they weren't, no one was paying me to do that, but it felt necessary for me to do. I think the thing about that, I was like, I worried a lot, like, oh, if I do that, if I say anything bad, people would advise you don't do that. What if you need a reference? I think I stopped caring about these kind of things and also started thinking as well, uh, this did happen. This was my experience. And similar, remember when we spoke and I asked you about what if a place saw what you were doing and we were like, oh, we're not don't like that. That you wouldn't want to work somewhere that doesn't appreciate, presumably, this is you, this is how you express yourself. And similarly, like I want someone. It wasn't horrible. It wasn't kind of abusive in this review. I was constructive and giving my experience, which is what the platform's there to do. That's another thing that you actually realize that loads of these reviews that people write are just to be able to gain access to the site because you have to write something. So you can't really trust what's there because, and I tried to write to Glassdoor to do an interview with a representative there to find out about how it works. But yeah, kind of writing that and writing these songs, that definitely helped. Also, just finally the penny dropping that it wasn't useful for me to have them living in my head for free and being angry. And I don't think I'm naturally an angry person. I think I'm a happy person, and I think a lot of life's experiences can have made me quite jaded and tired and bitter to a certain extent, and that's just not who I want to be or not who I think I want to go back to a kind of more primitive Sam, not primitive, but kind of the core. I want to go back to the Sam that was in elementary school, answering the questions and being enthusiastic and yeah, being happier.
Yeah.
And yeah, I am still bitter to an extent. I'm bitter that there just was so little care. That's I find I can deal with a company not doing what they say or making a product as I don't really think really blah blah blah. I just think in a human to human level, I think I was really let down, and I hope that they reflect on that and don't treat people like that because that's the shittiest thing. Just the human aspect of it, I think that I was hurting so much, and that after I left they continued to kind of just lack any kind of empathy, and all the responses were going for a legal team that then were clearly like very cold, and I don't know, I didn't like that.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. That is yeah. Yeah, she's
It
well,
doesn't really
so
answer like how you would get over the bitterness, I think, or maybe or the rumination. I think maybe the final point there is just asking oneself, does this help me to continue ruminating on this? Is this useful? Am I actually get moving anywhere, or am I just because I was going in circles? I've always been a ruminator, perhaps like you, but this was like also as well as peak kind of broken, depressed, like unsure, lacking confidence. It was peak rumination, like, and it just was. I need my brain for other things.
right. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's just a general point, not even a question. I do wonder um if that rumination was necessary. Um, because because I've always gotten this advice of, well, just move on. But I've always found it, especially, I mean, it just the more I I don't know. I'm curious about your thoughts on that. Do you think the rumination portion was necessary for you to? to even recognize that you need to move on, or do you think you could
Yeah.
have moved on from day
No,
one?
I don't think like I could move on by someone telling me move on. Like I think maybe I have to move on when for me it's like any problem like that you can want to help someone but they have to be ready for help or like I had to move on when I as much as I recognize it coming from a good place someone people telling me like you got to stop thinking about this blah 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 like it's when and it's a gradual thing it's not like suddenly switched off. I think it decreased and decreased. But as you can see, uh, like when brought up, like it still not triggers me, but it really bothers me. But it doesn't hit me emotionally in the same way, uh,
Yeah.
and it did then.
I think, yeah, like I definitely empathize. I have secondhand frustration from hearing you talk about it. I think that's a really relatable story, and the way that you've managed to bounce back from it, I think, is remarkable and inspirational. And it looks like you're well on the way, if not already there, to getting back to primitive Sam. I like that. I knew exactly what you meant by
Yeah,
that,
it
and
doesn't
I like
sound
that.
right, does it? Like, but I think you know what I mean. Just like a more
Yeah.
core, like in touch with like who I feel I am, but infused with all the lessons of life subsequently. I'm not trying to be
Yes.
a baby or a toddler again.
Yeah. Or a caveman. No, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, no, or a caveman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But great. So I think, yeah, I think this is a good place to stop. But were there any other thoughts or, anything you wanted to share before we conclude or before we end?
Um, you've got a you've got a question here, right? What are the positive and negative aspects of your neurodivergence? I think that like we've talked about where there's been struggles related to neurodivergence or the way one is interpreted, I just think as well, like in terms of self-awareness, like I've gained insights into a lot of things that I do that maybe differ from other people that I try to look at as positive attributes as well like yeah the critical thinking and that some people don't like being challenged but like there's real value in moving things forward in terms of being able to challenge things or not feeling things have to stay the way they are and being able to envision like different ways and I really dislike when people say oh that's just how it is and it's like no it could just how it is because that's how people have been doing it but things can be done a different way and um, just yeah, try to look more kindly at things that I do that I think are different from others um, that I see as not positives, just a difference and innate to me and others maybe with similar attributes. And there are lots of positive, but they're not, from my perspective, superpowers and they're not deficits, they're just differences.
What's an example of a different you feel is valuable that we historically haven't seen as valuable?
I think um, the end part of the question is tricky, but perceptual capacity is useful. Like I think we spoke a bit about that in terms of like that's being able to identify patterns quickly or see patterns in things, or be able to kind of. This is a tricky question. I think that this is one I want to give a better answer to than I can maybe formulate right now.
You can always
Or
leave a
or can we
comment
pause?
later. Or
Yeah, I'll leave a comment later, maybe on the video of a few examples that I think, if that's okay.
yeah, I think I'll pin that. Yeah, I think that would be pretty helpful for people to see. But
Yeah,
you worry about the second part of the question. You can really just focus on the first part of just, yeah, what are some things you do differently that you feel are valuable. Um, but okay. Um, yeah, we'll end here. Thank you so much for joining me, Sam. It was a pleasure.
thank you. Yeah, it was a real joy to talk to you. Thank you for the opportunity. And it's amazing as well. Like as I say, I've been a big fan of the channel, and I don't know, it's very cool to both talk to you and yeah, be on the channel. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
It's weird though, isn't it? No, I'm joking.
Okay. Okay. Here we go.
I don't know. It's like when you think of any relationship you have, apart from, I guess, your parents that you meet at the inception of your life, presumably, like that there was a point when you didn't know each other or like that you first met. I don't think that's an interesting. Well, okay, maybe it's not that interesting. Definitely, I think you can exclude this bit
I'll
from
I'll
from
keep
the.
it in. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. All right, and I'll end here. Yeah.